This program contains graphic violence and sexual situations. Viewer discretion is advised.
I'd like to show you something worse.
On November 16th, 1957.
What was his childhood like?
Only a mother could love you.
Sheriff Archley entered a decaying farmhouse in Plainfield, Wisconsin.
It's going, and especially really aberrant violent crime, it's going to have a huge impact on the public there.
I'm sorry, Mother.
Just go slow and steady.
Expecting to find clues about a missing hardware store owner.
That you've got missing cash from the scene, but you also have a missing body from the scene.
What he discovered instead would traumatize him for life.
And the scary thing is they look just like you.
And spawn every horror movie villain you've ever feared. Hanging from the ceiling was the headless, gutted corpse of Bernice Worden.
It's clear that the target is not just property, it's a person.
But that was just the beginning of the nightmare. But the man who created this house of horrors
Take your time, sweet boy.
wasn't some deranged stranger lurking in the shadows.
You're the one who can't look away.
Because Ed Gein was the quiet,
It's always with a sense of shame.
helpful neighbor who fixed your car and shoveled your driveway. And when investigators cataloged what they found in his farmhouse,
What did you do?
they realized they weren't just looking at murder,
He starts putting on female breasts, actual breasts.
but at the twisted mind that would inspire Norman Bates, Leatherface, and Buffalo Bill.
You can't trust any of them.
What they uncovered in that house was so disturbing that it created an entire genre of horror.
12 human heads, gloves made out of the skin from a corpse's finger.
And the evidence they found revealed a level of depravity that still haunts investigators today. Edward Theodore Gein wasn't born a monster. He was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse County, Wisconsin, to parents who would systematically destroy his ability to connect with other human beings. His father, George, was a violent alcoholic who terrorized the family when he wasn't passed out drunk. But it was his mother, Augusta, who would poison Ed's mind with her fanatical religious beliefs and pathological hatred of women. Augusta preached that all women except herself were whores and instruments of the devil. She isolated Ed from other children, forbidding him from making friends or having normal social interactions. She drilled into his head that sex was sinful, that women were evil, and that she was the only pure woman on earth. When George died in 1940, it was just Ed, his brother Henry, and their domineering mother on the isolated farm. But when Henry began questioning Augusta's control and suggesting she was unhealthy for Ed, he mysteriously died in a brush fire in 1944. Ed was the only witness. And then there was just Ed and his beloved mother, alone on the farm, living in their twisted world of religious fanaticism and psychological abuse. When Augusta suffered a stroke and died in 1945, Ed's world collapsed. The only person he had ever loved, the center of his universe, was gone. And that's when Ed Gein began his descent into madness. To the people of Plainfield, Ed Gein seemed harmless. Odd maybe, but harmless. He was the quiet handyman who would fix your car, shovel your driveway, or babysit your children. Neighbors described him as gentle, soft-spoken, and reliable. But they had no idea what Ed was doing in the darkness. After his mother's death, Ed sealed off her bedroom and living room, preserving them exactly as she had left them. He lived in the remaining rooms of the decaying farmhouse, surrounded by filth and rot. And then Ed discovered the local cemetery. And then he began reading anatomy books and gruesome crime magazines. And then he started making midnight visits to freshly dug graves. Ed would exhume recently buried bodies, particularly middle-aged women who reminded him of his mother. He would take them back to his farmhouse and dissect them, keeping parts as trophies and souvenirs. But grave robbing wasn't enough to satisfy Ed's twisted needs. He began fantasizing about becoming a woman, about transforming himself into his beloved mother. And to do that, he needed fresh materials, which meant he needed to kill. On December 8, 1954, tavern owner Mary Hogan vanished from her establishment in Pine Grove, Wisconsin. The only evidence was a pool of blood on the floor and a spent .32 caliber cartridge. But here's what makes this absolutely chilling. Ed Gein had been joking with neighbors about Mary Hogan for months after her disappearance. When someone mentioned her name, Ed would grin and say, "She isn't missing. She's at the farm right now." Everyone thought he was making a sick joke. They had no idea he was confessing. 3 years later, on November 16, 1957, hardware store owner Bernice Worden disappeared from her shop in Plainfield. Her son Frank, a deputy sheriff, had been hunting that morning. When he returned to find his mother gone and blood on the floor, he immediately suspected Ed Gein. Why? Because Ed had been in the store the day before, asking about antifreeze. And Bernice had told her son she was worried about the strange man who kept staring at her. Frank Worden knew something was wrong. He knew Ed Gein was involved. And when police searched Ed's farmhouse that evening, they discovered a nightmare that would haunt them forever. When Sheriff Art Schley entered Ed Gein's farmhouse on November 16, 1957, he was unprepared for what he would find. The stench hit him first, the overwhelming smell of death and decay. And then he saw Bernice Worden's body hanging from the ceiling, headless and gutted like a deer. But that was just the beginning of the horror. As investigators searched the house, they uncovered a museum of human remains. Skulls used as bowls, chairs upholstered with human skin, a shoebox containing 9 masks made from women's faces, soup bowls crafted from human skulls, a belt made from female nipples, lampshades and wastebaskets made from human skin. And in Ed's bedroom, they found his most prized possession, a suit made entirely from women's skin, complete with breasts and female genitalia. Ed had been wearing this skin suit, dancing around his farmhouse, pretending to be his dead mother. When confronted with the evidence, Ed confessed immediately. But his explanation was even more disturbing than his crimes. Ed Gein's confession revealed the twisted psychology behind his crimes. He told investigators he had been obsessed with his dead mother and had been trying to recreate her through his gruesome activities. He admitted to exhuming bodies from local cemeteries, always choosing middle-aged women who resembled Augusta. He would dissect them in his farmhouse, keeping parts as trophies and using others to create his macabre furniture and clothing. But the skin suit revealed his deepest psychological disturbance. Ed told psychiatrists he would wear the skin suit and dance around his house, believing he was transforming into a woman. He fantasized about becoming his mother, about literally inhabiting her body. Psychiatrists diagnosed Ed with schizophrenia and declared him mentally unfit to stand trial. But the damage was already done. The horror of Ed Gein's crimes had escaped that farmhouse and would infect popular culture forever. The legacy of horror Ed Gein spent the rest of his life in mental institutions, first at Central State Hospital and later at Mendota State Hospital. He was finally tried for the murder of Bernice Worden in 1968, found guilty but legally insane. He died in 1984, taking his secrets to the grave. But Ed Gein's true legacy isn't his death. It's the monsters he inspired. Every horror movie villain you've ever feared was born in Ed Gein's farmhouse. The quiet neighbor who seemed so harmless had created an entire genre of terror. His crimes revealed how monsters can hide in plain sight, how isolation and psychological abuse can create unthinkable evil. Ed Gein proved that the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones in movies. They're the ones living next door, smiling and waving while planning unspeakable horrors behind closed doors.